My name's David Katz. I was born in London, in the East End of London in 1966, which is probably a lot before some of your parents. But I'm very, very pleased to be here with you guys today. I turned professional as a photographer at the age of 19 in 1986. And as the introduction said, I've been fortunate enough to have photographed presidents, prime ministers, royalty, and celebrities. I'm honoured to be considered an internationally acclaimed photographer, and I've also been lucky enough to have had an amazing career working in a profession I absolutely love. I've also, as was introduced, been legally blind since birth. And it's actually quite funny. I remember when I used to give talks as a professional photographer before people knew my background and knew about my situation with my eyesight. And I used to get very nervous before I used to speak. A little bit more nervous than I am today. And someone kindly came up to me once and said, David, you know, there's no need to be nervous. You just have to imagine you can only actually see the front row of people. Well, he didn't know this at the time, but I can't even see the front row of people, so it's very easy, but I can feel you, and the vibe that's coming is excellent, so thank you for that. When I was born, and that's me with my parents, my grandmother spotted that there was something not quite right with my eyesight, and or certainly with the movement in my eyes, and she mentioned it to my mother. They thought it was normal for a child, fairly normal. And after 3 months, they realised it wasn't. They took me to the leading specialist in the country, in Great Britain at that time. And I was put under general anaesthetic. And after the tests, I was told, or my parents were told, in a very harsh way, in a very unpleasant way, by the doctor that their firstborn son was blind. Register him as blind, and in those days, he said, put him in a blind school, where basically, in those days, you were weaving baskets and piano tuning, which fortunately has changed a bit today, but not as much as we would actually like. The diagnosis took my parents and stunned them, as you can imagine. My mother questioned the doctor. He said, he's a doctor, he's the expert in the field, he's right, he knows best, and register him as blind and put him in a blind school. I have a condition called ocular albinism, which is actually a genetic condition, and it causes lack of pigmentation in my eyes. Now, that condition actually leads to me having something called nystagmus, which is a neurological condition, causing involuntary eye movements, and in my case also severe balance problems. And to give you an idea, it also causes something called photophobia, which is a condition that causes light to look even more bright. So standing in this condition is quite difficult. So if you guys imagine you're in a cinema position, which is kind of where we are today, and you go outside, you all know you get hit by that light, and for a few seconds it's overwhelming. Well, in my situation, that's the way I walk around most of the time in bright light, and kind of am standing in these kind of lights as well. So, for instance, it causes me to have problems with depth perception and judgment of distances, which are all good things to have as a photographer, as you can imagine. Also, I mean, it reminds me of certain situations, like the other day, a friend of mine was very excited about his glasses, virtual reality glasses, and it's like, you're wasting them on me. I look at a wonderful TV screen and I see like an old analog TV, so there's no point me doing that. So to give you an idea of how far I can see, because it's a question that I'm often asked, you all familiar of going into an ophthalmologist or an optician to have an eye test on an eye chart. Most of you, with or without glasses that can correct, which they don't in my situation, actually can maybe read the bottom line, second bottom, third line. So if I go like that with my hand over my left eye, looking out of my right eye, I can only just see that there's a light. With my left eye, on a good day, of which the condition has good and bad days, but on a good day I can see the top letter. So that gives you an idea of what I'm actually seeing. I was fortunate to be born to the most incredible parents. There wasn't the internet, there wasn't social media or support groups in the 1960s. There wasn't really in the early 2000s, but they were incredible. They decided that they were going to try and make my life as normal as possible. I couldn't speak. They didn't know what I could see and what I couldn't see until I could speak. And even then, our lives were through hospitals and being told what you can't do, okay? You're looking at something. My parents were told, at best, you know, David might be able to get around with a little bit of sight. He definitely won't be able to play sport. He definitely won't be able to play cricket. That's me in the top left-hand corner of the school cricket team, so they were wrong about that. Although a cricket ball is hard when it hits you in the head because you didn't see it, but you do it anyway. They then told me that, or they told my parents, he'll never play football, which you call soccer. So I apologise for that. That's me in the left-hand corner of the work soccer team. So we obviously ignored that, and I played soccer. I then wanted to do something else, very much my whole life. That's me in the blue padded hat, which didn't help very much. They said, you'll definitely never box. In all fairness, they were probably right about that. I actually probably shouldn't have. But I did. And this is the whole thing about overcoming, okay? Now, my parents obviously had an incredibly tough decision in the early 1970s to whether they were going to register me as blind or not, and that I was going to go to a blind school. They made an incredibly brave decision to send me to a regular school. It wasn't that they were in denial that I had a problem and they were trying to pretend everything was all right. They knew that everything wasn't all right, but they wanted to give me every chance. And if I wouldn't have managed to cope in a regular school, they would have taken me out. I did manage to cope because of their encouragement. I wasn't a great student. To come in the bottom of the class was a good achievement for me, but I did. Because of their encouragement and their belief in me, they sent me into a normal school. But obviously, you know, when you get to the age of about 7 years old, other kids start to notice that my eyes move. They notice that I have to sit at the front of the class and walk to the blackboard to see what the teacher's written, and that I look very close at books, and that I'm different. And I started to understand it as well. I at that point, for a short while, until I learned exactly how to deal with it, got called names. I got called names that up until recently I couldn't even repeat, but I'm going to say them now. I got called goggle eyes and wobbly eyes and things that are obviously very hurtful to a child of that age. But again, having wonderful parents who supported me and taught me how to deal with this, they empowered me, and they gave me the momentum to continue to get through that aspect of my life. And to the point where, as a 7-year-old, I was crazy about the camera that my dad had, and I wanted to pick up this camera. And I drove him so crazy, in the end, he gave his visually impaired, legally blind son the camera to shut him up. And that basically changed my life because I could see things in a certain way. It wasn't that I could see them any better, I just saw them differently. And I realized that I could do things with a camera and create things with a camera that I wasn't able to do in any other way. And I believe very strongly, as a philosophy, is that it's not about how far we can see, it's about what we can see. People with very poor eyesight often have amazing vision. They use other parts of their body, other senses, hearing, touch, smell. And that was the same with myself. So you hone in on that. And sometimes people with really good eyesight walk around almost blindly. They can see 100 feet away, but they don't really see anything because they're not really looking. Because of what I explained earlier in relation to the photophobia and the light situation, when I go behind a viewfinder, it actually stops a lot of the information that my brain can't handle coming into my eye. So it actually helps me being behind a viewfinder. I was a soccer fanatic. I'm sorry, it's still hard for me to say soccer, but if I say football, you guys think of something else. So I was a soccer fanatic, and I wanted to see my team play. And all my friends were going to see their teams play, and my father wasn't able to take me because he knew I wouldn't be able to see. But at 11 years old, I was fortunate enough to be introduced to a wonderful doctor who changed my life. Most doctors at that time wanted to just do tests and shine lights in your eyes. They didn't really see us as human beings and people. But she saw me as a person, and she was very interested in helping me with the things that I liked. And she knew I loved football. She gave me a very small pair of binoculars at that time, which were kind of revolutionary. This was like 1977, which allowed me to go to soccer for the first time and to continue to go to soccer and to be able to see it. That led me to, when people ask, well, how did you get to the stage where you actually became a photographer? I wasn't able to watch a match or a sporting event the same way most of you guys would be to watch the whole of the action. I could only watch part of the action. So I had to focus in and be quick to actually manage to follow where the ball was and the players, which actually helped me when I decided I wanted crazily to be a sports photographer, because blind people want to be sports photographers. And very, very shortly, within a few years, as almost a 15, 16-year-old, I was in a situation where I was able to buy my first camera. I'd started work in an office job, and I bought a camera, and I didn't want to settle for going over the local park. I wanted to go to the team that I supported as a child on the pitch with the other press photographers and photograph. Why shouldn't I? And I did. And by the time I was 19 years old, I was already working regularly for a British newspaper called the Daily Mail, which I'm very proud that I caught. I was part of Fleet Street, which was a 100-year-old street where all the newspapers and photo agencies resided. And if you get to that level, you're seen as someone who's reached a certain level in the profession. And I was already doing that at 19, which for me was a great honour, and also bearing in mind that I had a visual impairment, which no one knew about, was even greater. I was lucky enough in that time to photograph the most amazing things, and you're seeing some of the pictures from my career that I photographed. I photographed at a time, I started at a time before autofocus, before Photoshop, before digital photography, so I really had to use my gift for photography and the way that I see things, which I believe makes me a better photographer rather than takes it away from me. What people said to me, especially recently since my story has become public, is why did I conceal it for so long? Why did I keep it, what they say is a secret? I say I kept it in different compartments because I knew that no matter how much anybody liked me, it would damage my career and probably finish it. So I held it until I was ready, on my terms, to come out and tell the story, which I did a year ago in a film. And I made that story public deliberately because I wanted to show younger people like yourselves, and also ones with visual impairments and the same condition that I have, that you can actually do a lot more than people tell you. Teachers tell you you can't do this. Doctors tell you you can't do this. Sometimes friends tell you you can't do this. Well, I wanted to show that you could, and there are a lot of other people out there who have achieved greatly with the condition that I have. They might not necessarily have been a photographer, but there's a member of parliament, there's TV presenters, there's flutists, musicians, academics, and when you go onto Google, when a child is first diagnosed, you see only negative aspects of the condition, that you won't achieve, that socially you'll be a misfit, you'll never drive, you'll never achieve at school, you'll never have a partner. These are all misconceptions, and we're trying very hard to show that they really are misconceptions by making people awareness, and it's taken on a momentum of being able to have the opportunity to speak to different groups of people, most importantly, people with conditions themselves who need to be told or shown what can actually be done rather than what can't be done. I want to make sure that you guys understand, but everybody understands, that you don't let a disability stop you from your passion. And I'll finish by saying something that my mum said to me when I was 7 years old, when I was realizing that I had this condition and having to live with it for the rest of my life, and not thinking that I was able to cope with it, and being very upset. And she said to me, "David, there's no such word as can't." She was right. Thank you.